I never thought I'd be in this position, sharing a story that tore my heart apart just to rebuild it piece by piece. But here I am. My name is Coover Annan, and until not too long ago, I thought I had a pretty stable, even comfortable life. You know, one of those lives where everything looks perfectly fine from the outside. I had a decent job as an accountant at a mid-sized firm, a modest yet cozy apartment in the suburbs, and a marriage that I genuinely believed was strong. Solid, even. I was married to Mark for 10 years. And we weren't just husband and wife. We were parents to a wonderful little girl named Sarah. She was the light of our lives, our heartbeat in human form. Mark and I met back in college. He was the slick business major, all charm and confidence, the kind of guy who always knew the right thing to say. Me? I was the quiet girl who found more comfort in spreadsheets than in small talk. We were total opposites, yet somehow it worked. We clicked. After college, we got jobs, moved in together, tied the knot. Everything just fell into place. And when Sarah was born 2 years later, I felt like we had it all. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what happiness feels like. We had our routines, morning coffee together, movie nights on Fridays, the occasional getaway when life allowed. Nothing flashy, just real, comfortable, safe. Until it wasn't. It was a Tuesday evening in March. Just a regular day, or so I thought. Sarah, who was 8 at the time, had already gone to bed. Mark and I were sitting at our kitchen table, sipping coffee, talking about nothing in particular. But I could tell something was off. His fingers kept fidgeting with the handle of his mug, and his eyes darted everywhere but mine. "Coover," he said, his voice too quiet. "We need to talk." That sentence, it always signals something bad. My heart sank. "What's wrong?" I asked, but part of me already knew. There had been signs, late nights at work, texts he never let me see, a distance that had slowly grown between us, like a crack in the wall we were pretending not to notice. He looked straight at me and said it. "I've met someone else." 4 words. Just 4. But they shattered everything. Everything we had, everything I believed about my life and marriage. Gone, just like that. Her name was Rebecca. She worked in his department. Apparently, they'd been seeing each other for months. I sat there in silence, numb, as he tried to explain. He said things like, "We've grown apart, and she understands me in ways you don't." And all I could think about was Sarah, upstairs in her room, fast asleep, completely unaware that her world was about to crack right down the middle. Those next few weeks? A blur. Mediation sessions, dividing assets, custody conversations. I went through the motions like a robot on autopilot. We agreed to stay civil, for Sarah's sake. I kept the apartment. Mark took the car and the yacht, which, honestly, I never cared for anyway. He promised generous child support, and we settled on a shared custody plan. Sarah would primarily live with me but spend time with him regularly. "I know I've hurt you," he said during our final mediation meeting, "but I want to be a good father to Sarah." I just nodded. What could I say to that? The man I had trusted, the man I built my life with, had betrayed me. But he was still Sarah's dad. And she deserved both of us in her life, even if I had to swallow my pain and play nice for her sake. Time passed. 1 year turned into another, and I slowly started to feel like I could breathe again. Sarah had just turned 9, and though the ache in my heart lingered, I was healing. We'd found our rhythm, just the 2 of us. Movie nights, pancakes on Saturdays, long walks in the park. Then the wedding invitation came. Not for me, of course. For Sarah. Mark and Rebecca were getting married. They had bought a house together. Or rather, they were moving into her house, a fancy, picture-perfect place in the nicest part of town. Manicured lawn, 3-car garage, white columns on the porch. It looked like something out of a real estate commercial. The morning of the wedding, I helped Sarah get ready. She wore a pale blue dress we'd picked out together, and I braided her hair the way she liked it. "Are you sure you're okay with me going, Mom?" she asked, watching me in the mirror. "Of course I am, sweetheart," I replied, forcing a smile. "She's going to be your stepmother. It's important you 2 get along." "But aren't you sad?" I turned her around to face me. "Listen to me, Sarah. What happened between your dad and me? That's grown-up stuff. It's not your burden. I want you to have a good relationship with both of them. No sides, okay?" She hugged me so tightly I nearly cried. "You're the best mom ever," she whispered. Mark arrived in his shiny new SUV, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. Sarah climbed in, and I waved as they pulled away, then spent the rest of the day scrubbing the kitchen, not thinking about the wedding, Not at all. When Sarah came home that night, she was full of stories. The flowers, the cake, her new room in their big house. I listened, nodded, smiled. That's what moms do, right? We smile even when our hearts are breaking. Life went on. I focused on work and raising Sarah. We built our own life. It wasn't grand or glamorous, but it was ours. Our apartment, our little rituals, our peace. Then one weekend, Sarah came home bouncing with excitement. "Guess what?" she beamed, dropping her backpack at the door. "Rebecca's pregnant. I'm going to have a little brother or sister." That familiar punch-to-the-gut feeling came rushing back, but I kept my face neutral. "Really? That's big news." "Yeah. You can even see her belly a little now. Dad's super excited. He keeps talking about turning the guest room into a nursery." I nodded again, even though every cell in my body screamed, "Please don't forget her. Please don't make Sarah feel like she's being replaced." A month later, Sarah returned early from what was supposed to be a week-long stay with her dad. She looked frustrated, tired even. "Rebecca's really sick," she explained, plopping onto the couch. "She keeps throwing up and getting mad at everything. Even the smell of Dad's coffee made her cry. She said my laugh was too loud and asked me to come home early." I tried to be understanding. I remembered morning sickness, the hormones, the irritability. I didn't blame Rebecca. Not yet. Weeks passed. Everything seemed to settle again. Until one evening when Mark called with a request that raised every red flag in my soul. It was a Tuesday evening when Mark called. Nothing unusual about that, except his voice had that smooth, careful tone he always used when he wanted something. "Hey, Coover," he said, pausing like he was easing into a sales pitch. "I was thinking, would it be okay if Sarah stayed with us for the next month instead of with you?" I blinked. "She's supposed to be with me. That's what we agreed." I know, he replied quickly. "But she and Rebecca have really been bonding. Sarah's been helping around the house, and they're getting close. Rebecca's been having a rough time with the pregnancy, and Sarah's just been such a great help. It would mean a lot." I took a breath, careful not to let the irritation in my chest spill into my voice. "I'll ask Sarah what she wants." I called her over. She came to the phone, her face already a mix of confusion and hesitation. Then in the background, I heard Mark's voice, excited, upbeat. "Oh, and sweetheart, I picked up that new computer game you've been talking about, the one with the dragons." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Mom, can I please?" What was I supposed to say? Say no and become the bad guy? The parent who doesn't let her child have fun? "If that's what you want, sweetie." And that was that. The next 2 weeks were oddly quiet. Mark handled school pickups and drop-offs. Sarah sent me cheerful photos, her cooking something at their fancy kitchen island, smiling with a controller in hand while playing the dragon game, lounging on their expensive-looking couch. Everything looked fine. Too fine. Something about the pictures bothered me. They felt curated, like someone had carefully arranged each one. I shook the thought off. Maybe I was just being overprotective. Maybe I was letting my feelings about Mark and Rebecca cloud my judgment. But when Sarah finally came home, my gut twisted the moment I saw her. She looked pale, drained. Her eyes had dark shadows beneath them, and she moved like her body was made of bricks. "Sarah, honey, are you okay?" I asked as I helped her unpack. "I'm fine," she mumbled, "just a little tired." "Are you sure you look—" "I'm fine," she insisted. "Rebecca just needed a little help. I did some cleaning and stuff. She can't really do much right now because of the baby." She said it like it was no big deal. Like it was normal for a 12-year-old to take over household responsibilities while her father and stepmother looked on. "You cleaned?" "Yeah, vacuuming, mopping, cooking spaghetti. I learned how to cut vegetables." My heart clenched. She was trying to be proud of herself, and I was proud of her, so proud of her big heart, but also furious. "That's really kind of you, sweetheart," I said gently, hugging her. "But don't forget, you're still a kid. You don't need to do everything." For a while, life settled back into our rhythm again. Sarah went back to school. I returned to work. Everything seemed calm, until the night my phone rang again. Mark. "Hey, Coover," he said, his voice smooth and practiced again. "Listen, I know it's not our week, but Rebecca's really been enjoying Sarah's company. She's just been amazing with her. Cooking, helping with laundry, keeping Rebecca company. Would it be okay if she stayed a little longer?" I was already frowning. Something about the way he said helping with laundry rubbed me the wrong way. "I'll ask Sarah," I said again. She took the phone and listened. I could tell she was torn. Then I heard Mark sweeten the deal. "And remember, kiddo, I bought that expansion pack for the dragon game, the one you've been waiting for." Sarah's eyes lit up again. "Mom, please?" "Of course. I nodded, but my gut screamed at me the moment she left. During the next week, Sarah's texts continued, short but upbeat. Photos kept coming too. Her stirring a pot on the stove, her folding laundry on a spotless couch, her holding a sponge by the kitchen sink. Something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it all felt too intentional. Then finally she came home, and my stomach dropped. She looked worse than before. Gaunt, hollow. Her skin had gone pale, and her arms looked thinner. She walked with a slump like she was dragging invisible weights. "Sweetie," I whispered, pulling her close. "What's wrong?" She barely spoke. "I'm just tired, Mom. Can I go to bed?" "Don't you want dinner?" She shook her head. "I'm not hungry." She shuffled to her room and collapsed on the bed, fully dressed, backpack still on. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Something was wrong. Something terrible. The next day I called Mark. "What's going on over there?" I demanded. "Sarah looks like she hasn't slept in days." "Oh, come on, Coover," he said with a dismissive laugh. "You're exaggerating. Again. She's fine. She's just been helping Rebecca a little. Probably not used to doing chores since you spoil her." That one stung, but I wasn't backing down. "This isn't about me. I'm talking about our daughter. She's exhausted and scared. She told me she's afraid of the stove." "She's being dramatic. A little work never hurt anyone." I hung up, seething. He wasn't going to help. That much was clear. The next morning, I made Sarah her favorite, chocolate chip pancakes, for lunch. I slid the plate in front of her. "Sweetie," I said gently, "you've got to tell me what's going on." She kept her eyes on the table, pushing the pancakes around with her fork. Then slowly, she opened up. "Rebecca doesn't really do anything anymore. She says she can't. She makes me clean everything, the floors, the bathrooms, the dishes. I have to make dinner. I have to use the stove." I clenched my hands under the table. "She says my laugh is too loud. My footsteps are too heavy. I tried watching TV once, and she said it gave her a headache, so I had to go to my room and be quiet." "And Dad?" I asked softly. "He says I need to help out, that he pays you too much and I should earn my keep." I was shaking now. The image of Sarah, my sweet girl, being treated like a maid, it made me sick. I called Mark again. He picked up on the fourth ring. "What now, Coover?" "How about explaining why our daughter is being used like Cinderella in your house?" He scoffed. "She's exaggerating." "She's 12, Mark. She's exhausted. She's scared to cook. This isn't okay." He hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand and then looked at Sarah. Her eyes looked so tired. My child, being crushed under the weight of grown-up responsibilities she should never have had. Enough was enough. I knew I had to do something. Waiting and hoping Mark would change wasn't going to cut it. Sarah was slipping away from me. I saw it in her eyes, in the way she barely smiled anymore, the way she jumped at small noises. This wasn't just a phase. It was damage. I waited until Sarah was asleep that night. Then I called my sister Amy. "I need a favor," I said. My voice cracked, but I held it together. Amy showed up 20 minutes later, clutching a blanket and a bag of takeout like she already knew I was barely hanging on. I spilled everything. The exhaustion, the chores, the way Mark dismissed every concern like I was making it up. Amy sat quietly, letting me talk until I couldn't anymore. "Let's get proof," she finally said. And that's when the plan started forming. The next time Mark came to pick Sarah up, I was ready. He stood at the door, fake smile in place, pretending like nothing was wrong. But I could see the annoyance bubbling just under the surface. "Hey, Princess," he said to Sarah. "Got your bag?" "Just a minute," I said, pulling her aside before she could leave. I knelt down, lowered my voice, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Take your phone with you. Turn on the voice recorder app. Record everything. What Rebecca says, what your dad says. Keep it running. Don't let them know. This is just between us, okay?" Sarah's eyes widened. Then she nodded slowly. I squeezed her hand. "You're so brave," I whispered. 5 minutes later, she left. Mark checked his phone while waiting by the car, pretending not to care, pretending not to know he was already losing her. The next week felt like torture. Every buzz on my phone made my heart jump. Sarah sent short texts. "I'm okay. Everything's fine. Don't worry." But I knew better. Moms know. Then came Tuesday. Rainy, gray, heavy. I was cleaning the kitchen when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and froze. Sarah was standing there, soaking wet, hair plastered to her cheeks, trembling, alone. My heart stopped. "Oh my God," I gasped, pulling her inside. "What happened? How did you get here?" "I ran away," she whispered. "Took the bus." She was freezing. Her hands were red and raw, with small calluses starting to form. She winced as I helped her out of her wet jacket. Her shoes were soaked. Her socks, too. I felt her forehead, cold, tired. "Let's get you warm first," I said, trying to stay calm. "Food, then we'll talk." I made grilled cheese and tomato soup, her comfort food. She ate like she hadn't seen a meal in days, and when she was done, she looked at me and said, "I have the recordings." My hands trembled as I took her phone. She opened the voice recorder app and handed it to me like it was made of glass. The first recording started with Rebecca's voice, sharp and cold. "You stupid, clumsy girl! Can't you do anything right? Look at these floors. Do them again." Sarah's small voice followed. "I'm trying my best." "Well, your best isn't good enough. And when you're done, dinner needs to be started." Another recording. Rebecca again. "Stop making noise. My head is pounding. Just go to your room and be quiet." Another. "Cut the vegetables thinner. I told you how I like them. Do it right this time." Then came Mark. "Dad, please," Sarah's voice cracked. "I'm tired." "You're just lazy," he snapped. "You know how much I pay your mother? The least you can do is help out." "But I'm scared to use the stove. If you tell your mother about this, I'll take her to court. I'll get full custody. You'll never see her again." I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely breathe. This wasn't just parenting differences. This wasn't even bad judgment. This was abuse. I held Sarah. She cried into my chest until her body stopped shaking. I stroked her hair and made a silent promise. "I won't let them hurt you again, ever." Once she fell asleep on the couch, curled up under a blanket, I picked up the phone again. I called Amy. "Get in the car," I said. "We're going to Mark's." We drove through the rain in silence. I was vibrating with fury, not the kind that shouts and slams doors, the cold kind, the kind that comes when you've had enough. Mark opened the door, scowling. "What the hell are you doing here?" I pushed past him. "Where is she?" he demanded. "She's safe," I said. "She ran away from you, Mark. Think about that. Your 12-year-old daughter ran through the rain just to get away from your house." Rebecca waddled into the hallway, one hand on her swollen belly. She looked confused for a second, then smug. "She's dramatic," Rebecca said. "Always making up stories. You've spoiled her rotten." "Really?" I pulled out my phone. "She made this up too?" I hit play. Rebecca's voice exploded from the speaker. "You stupid, clumsy girl." Both of them froze. I kept playing it, one after another. Mark's threats, Rebecca's insults, the cruelty, the dismissiveness, the gaslighting. Mark's face twisted. "You think this changes anything? I have lawyers." Rebecca clutched her belly dramatically. "You're stressing me out. You're hurting me." I turned to her calmly. "If you want a maid, raise your own child. My daughter is not your servant." Then I turned back to Mark. "You failed her, the one person you should never have failed." And I walked out. I didn't wait for a response, didn't need one. They could have their perfect house and their perfect little bubble. I had something far more valuable, my daughter. The next morning, I called the best family law attorney I could find. Her name was Linda Stevenson, and from the first 5 minutes of our conversation, I knew she was exactly what I needed. Calm, experienced, no nonsense, but with a fire in her voice when I told her what had happened. I handed her the recordings, and for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. The legal battle that followed was exhausting. Mark had money, and he wasn't afraid to use it. He hired a team of expensive attorneys who came after me with everything they had. They painted me as a bitter ex-wife, hell-bent on revenge. Said I was using Sarah as a pawn, accused me of alienating her from her father. They spun lies, twisted facts, and tried to make me look like the villain. But what they didn't have, what they couldn't fabricate, was the truth. And the truth was recorded. We played those recordings in court, one after another. Rebecca's voice, shrill and condescending, Mark's threats, cold and calculated. The gaslighting, the emotional manipulation, the verbal abuse, it was all there. The courtroom was silent except for those voices echoing through the speakers. I watched the judge's expression darken with each clip. Even Mark's lawyers started shifting uncomfortably in their seats. And then it was Sarah's turn. She sat in the witness chair, looking so small, but her voice, clear, steady, brave, filled the room. She talked about the chores, about cooking with shaking hands, about folding laundry while her stepmother criticized her every move, about being told her laughter was too loud, that she walked too heavily, that she needed to be quiet, about how scared she was to speak up because of what her father might do. I saw a juror wipe away tears. Another woman seated near the back covered her mouth with her hand. When Sarah said, "I was just trying to be good, but nothing I did was ever good enough," my heart cracked wide open. It didn't matter how shiny their house was. It didn't matter how expensive their lawyers were. In that moment, everyone in that courtroom saw the truth. The verdict came down fast. Full custody was granted to me. Mark lost all visitation rights unless I explicitly permitted them. He was still required to pay child support, but he no longer had any legal power over our daughter. Not one decision, not one day. Mark exploded outside the courtroom. "Happy now?" he spat, cornering me in the hallway. "This is what you wanted all along, isn't it? Revenge because I left you for someone better?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel rage. I just felt pity. "This was never about you, Mark," I said, my voice calm. "It was about Sarah, and you failed her." He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "You had a choice. You could have protected her. You could have stopped Rebecca. You could have been a father. But instead, you became the reason she ran away in the rain." He stared at me, face red, jaw clenched, but he said nothing. That was the last real conversation we ever had. In the months that followed, Sarah began to heal. Her grades bounced back. Her teachers told me she smiled more in class, laughed louder, made friends more easily. The dark circles under her eyes faded, her shoulders straightened. We found joy again. Real, honest-to-God joy. Our little apartment, modest and imperfect, became a home again. Saturday pancakes returned, Sunday walks came back. Movie nights were full of popcorn and belly laughs. Sarah turned 14 recently. She's taller now, more confident, and sometimes I catch glimpses of the strong young woman she's becoming. The other day, I overheard her talking to her best friend in the kitchen. "Don't you miss your dad?" her friend asked. Sarah paused. "Sometimes," she said softly, "but not seeing him is better than feeling like I'm worthless." Then she added, "Besides, I have the best mom in the world." I turned away before she could see the tears in my eyes. It wasn't the ending I once pictured for my life, not the fairy tale I thought I was living when Mark and I stood in front of our friends and family and promised forever. But in so many ways it's better, because now our home is filled with laughter that no one tells us to hush. Sarah doesn't walk on eggshells. She walks tall, loud, and free, and I don't have to wonder if I did the right thing. I know I did. I chose my daughter. I chose peace over pretense. I chose love, not the kind that comes in a fancy house or a perfect-looking family, but the kind that shows up when it matters, the kind that wraps around a child and says, "You are safe here, you are seen, you are enough." Every day, I watch Sarah grow stronger, and every night when I kiss her goodnight, I remember that rainy Tuesday, the day she came home. And I promise her silently, over and over again, "Never again. You are home now.